Welcome, loyal wanderers, to a new episode of Echoes from the Loam. Ever wondered what would happen if the bell rang 13 times instead of 12 on the stroke of midnight New Year's Eve? Well, grab your lanterns, lock your doors. You're about to find out. The fog had teeth that night. It rolled in from the sea like something thick, wet and dark at the edges, as if stained by centuries of breath and summoned. It clung to the cobblestones and curled around the iron railings and muffled the sound of the tide gnawing at the harbour wall. Midnight approached, and in the square below the villagers gathered in ritual hush. No one spoke, no one smiled. They wore their coats buttoned to the throat, their gloves stitched tight, and their eyes fixed on the tower's clock face. 12 chimes every year, 12 chances to forget, 12 tolls to seal the past. But this year something was different. The air felt too still, and the cold too deep, and the tower, ancient and soot-streaked, leaning slightly westward as if burdened by time, seemed to breathe. Tobias stood apart from the crowd, his boots planted in frostbitten moss, his breath fogging in the lantern lights. He had returned after 20 years, drawn by a letter with no sender, no stamp, and only a single line scrawled in rust-coloured ink. Come home before the 13th chime. He didn't know what it meant. Not yet, anyway. The first chime rang out, low, mournful and metallic. It echoed through the square like a funeral bell, and Tobias felt it in his teeth. The second followed, and the third, each one seemingly slower than the last, as if the tower itself hesitated. And by the 12th, the crowd had begun to shift, eyes darting and hands trembling. A child whimpered, quickly hushed, and then silence. A long, aching, expectant silence. And then it came. The 13th chime. A sound like iron tearing through bone, like breath caught in a throat too long dead. The fog recoiled and the lanterns flickered, and every villager turned. Not toward the tower, but towards Tobias. Because he remembered. He remembered the year that never ended, the year that was buried, the year that clawed at the edges of his dreams, whispering in the voice of someone he'd never met. And now it was awake. The sound seemed to linger, but not in the air, inside Tobias's chest, like something had nested between his ribs. The crowd had scattered, boots scraping along stone, voices swallowed by fog. But Tobias remained, rooted to the square, staring up at the tower's crooked face. The 13th chime had changed the town. He turned slowly and saw it. The bakery was gone, and in its place stood a butcher's shop, boarded and blackened, its windows smeared with something dark. The sign above the door read Merrick and Sons, though Tobias knew no Merricks had ever lived here. The fog parted like breath on the glass, revealing a narrow alley that hadn't existed before. It sloped downward, slick with moss, and at the end stood a door, wooden, warped and painted the colour of rot. He didn't remember it, but somehow he knew it. His hand reached out before he could stop it, and the door opened with a sigh, and the world tilted. Inside was a kitchen, familiar but wrong. The wallpaper was green instead of blue, and the kettle whistled though no one had lit the stove. A woman stood at the sink, her back to him, humming a tune that made his teeth ache. "Tobias," she said without turning. He froze. She wore a red scarf, her hair was braided with twine. Her hands, he could see them now, were raw, blistered, stained with something that definitely wasn't water. "You're late." He tried to speak, but his voice was gone. The room pulsed and the walls breathed, and the woman turned. Her face was his mother's, but younger. Her shadow stretched across the floor, long and thin and twitching at the edges. "You promised," she said, stepping closer. "You promised to forget." The kettle screamed, the wallpaper peeled, and Tobias remembered. A birthday that never happened, a funeral he never attended, a promise made in a room that didn't exist. The 13th year had begun. The memory dissolved like smoke. Tobias stumbled backwards into the alley, heart hammering, breath sharp and sour, and the door was gone. The butcher's shop was gone. Even the fog had thinned, revealing a town that looked almost right, but not quite. The clock tower loomed above him, its face cracked, its hands twitching, and he moved towards it. The square was empty now, no villagers or lanterns, just the sound of the tide, louder than it should be, and the slow, deliberate tick of the tower's heart. Front doors were ajar. Tobias stepped in. Inside, the air was colder. Not winter cold, but cellar cold, wet and old and damp. The walls were stone, slick with moss, and the stairs in front of him spiraled upwards, narrow and uneven, carved by hands that had long since gone. Tobias climbed, and each step groaned beneath him, as if remembering every foot that had passed before. He counted 12 landings, and at the 13th the staircase ended, but not in a chamber, but a door, small, wooden, and painted the colour of dried blood. He hesitated. The door creaked. Behind it, something moved. He reached out, fingers trembling, and pushed. The chamber was circular, no windows, no bells, just a second clock. Its face carved from bone, its hands made from teeth, and it ticked in time with his heartbeat. And on the floor before him lay a circle of salt, broken, a ritual interrupted. And in the centre, a mirror. But it wasn't showing his reflection. It showed the town, but twisted. The buildings were wrong, the sky was red, the villagers wore masks stitched from their own skin, and in the square, beneath the tower, stood Tobias. But he was smiling, and his eyes were black. The clock ticked, and Tobias remembered. The 13th year was not coming. It had already begun. Tobias fell forward, not with impact, but with absence, and the chamber vanished. The salt circle, the bone clock, the cold, wet air, all gone. He landed in silence, knees sinking into wet earth. It was night, but not the same night. The sky above him was red-veined and twitching like muscle beneath skin. The stars were too close and too many. The town lay ahead, but it was hollowed. Buildings leaned at impossible angles, and windows blinked and doors breathed, and the clock tower was bleeding. Dark fluid trickled from its face, pooling in the square like oil. The hands spun backward, and the chimes rang 12, 11, 10. Each one stitched from voices Tobias almost recognised. He moved through the streets. The villagers were there, but their faces stitched shut. Their limbs bent the wrong way. They wore masks of their own memories, wedding veils, baby blankets, funeral gloves, and they whispered as he passed them. You broke the circle. You let it in. You are the 13th. Tobias ran, but the town ran with him. Streets folded, buildings split. The fog returned, thick and full of teeth. He stumbled into the churchyard, except it wasn't a church anymore. It was a mouth, or a mouth-like, wide, stone and waiting, and inside the pews were filled with shadows. And at the altar stood the woman from the kitchen, her eyes black, her smile stitched on. She held a book bound in skin, its pages blank but bleeding. You must finish the ritual, she said, and Tobias stepped forward and the book opened. Inside was his name, written 13 times, each in a different hand, each crossed out, each followed by a date that hadn't happened yet. He turned to the final page and it was blank. And then the bell rang once more. The tower screamed, and Tobias remembered that he had never left. The altar split open, not with sound but with pressure, like something inside had swollen beyond its limits. Stone cracked, wood groaned, and beneath the pulpit, a staircase spiraled downwards. Tobias descended slowly. The walls were stitched leather, not wallpaper, not stone, but flesh, tanned, stretched, and etched with names. Some he recognised, some he had yet to learn. The air was thick with rot and incense, sweet and sickening like burnt sugar over spoiled meat. And at the very bottom lay the chamber. 13 figures stood in a circle, faceless, robed in garments made from memories. A wedding dress soaked in brine, a child's coat stitched with teeth, and a soldier's uniform weeping with rust. Each held a blade, each pointed it in, and in the centre knelt a body. It was Tobias, but it wasn't. His skin was wrong, too smooth, too pale. The eyes were open but glassy. The mouth moved but no breath came. It whispered his name over and over. He stepped closer and the circle did not stop him. The blades did not rise, and the robed figures began to chant, not in words but sounds, guttural and rhythmic. The body twitched, its chest split, revealing a clock embedded in bone. Its hands spun wildly, ticking in time with Tobias's pulse. He reached out. The clock stopped, and the body screamed. Not aloud, but through the chamber itself. The walls convulsed, the floor bled, and the robed figures collapsed, their garments unraveling into sinew and salt. The blades melted and the air thickened, and the body stood. It wore his face. It smiled with his mouth, and it whispered, "You broke the seal. You are the 13th. Now we begin." And as the chamber collapsed, Tobias did not scream, he remembered. The chamber folded. Walls peeled back like wet pages. The stitched leather split, revealing muscle, bone, and something deeper, something that pulsed with memories. The altar melted into sinew, the mirror cracked but did not break, and the body wearing Tobias's face stepped forward smiling. Its teeth were sharp, its eyes were black, but not empty, they were full of every moment Tobias had forgotten, every lie he'd told, every promise he'd buried. "You are the 13th, it said. Tobias tried to run, but the chamber ran with him. The floor stretched, becoming hallway, becoming street, becoming childhood bedroom. The walls shifted, stone to wallpaper to skin. He passed through memories that weren't his. A birthday party in a burning house, a wedding in a graveyard, a lullaby sung in reverse. And each step tore something loose. His name, his face, his time. He reached the square and the town was waiting. The villagers stood in a circle, their masks gone, their faces raw and open. They held clocks in their hands, broken, bleeding, ticking in reverse. The tower loomed above, its chimes silent now, its face cracked wide. And inside the crack something moved. It was him. It was not him. It was the 13th. The villagers began to chant, not words but fragments, syllables from dreams, vowels from screams, consonants from prayers never answered. The sound built, thick and wet and rising. Tobias stepped into the circle and the body met him. They touched and the world split. A final chime rang out low, slow. It echoed through bone, through breath, through time. The villagers collapsed. The tower crumbled. The sky peeled back to reveal nothing. And Tobias remembered. He had never been born. He had always been waiting. He was the 13th, the year that would never end. Happy New Year, wanderers. Listen closely with bated breath as the bell tolls at midnight. Count each one and pray. Pray the 13th doesn't come.
The clock struck wrong, the year unmade, the 13th chime where none should fade. The sky split wide, the stars grew teeth, and time crawled out from underneath. No birth, no death, no breath, no name, just echoes stitched in skin and flame. The town forgot The tower wept, the salt circle broke, where secrets slept. A mirror blinked, a face was worn, a promise kept by being torn. The 13th year does not begin, it waits beneath your outer skin. So light no fire and speak no vow. The year is not behind you now. It walks beside, it wears your face, it knows the paths you won't retrace. And when the chime begins to ring, don't run, don't hide, don't say a thing. Just close your eyes and count to 1. The 13th year is never done.
And there the tale ends for now, but the echoes will always remain. If you've enjoyed your stay here in my domain, leave your mark, a review, a whisper, a 5-star sigil. Until next time, wanderers, I've been Fauna Blakewell, and you've been changed forever.